Caravaggio's paintings were to help people transform and to feel and to touch and have that immediate contact with the mercy that they saw before them.
Above the main altar in an unassuming church in Naples sits a masterpiece of Italian art. Caravaggio's 7 Acts of Mercy, painted in 1607, tells a much deeper story than may first appear. Terence Ward merges history, memoir, and investigative journalism in this stirring and remarkable dual narrative. The Guardian of Mercy, how an extraordinary painting by Caravaggio changed an ordinary life today, right now on Subject Matters. Terence, welcome to Subject Matters. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Sebastian.
Now, your book is really remarkable, and it brings 2 lives together very unexpectedly. You have the early 17th century painter Caravaggio, who many people know, and then the protagonist of your story, Angelo Esposito, the Guardian of Mercy,
Yes.
and who became a friend of yours actually
Yes.
through this whole experience. But set the stage for us. What was your first encounter with Angelo?
Well, first, I would say that I didn't seek out this story. This story found me. And occasionally there are moments in life where destiny reaches out and grabs you. And this was a story like that. I had gone down to Naples with my wife, who also has Neapolitan blood. And we were hosted by a friend. And the friend suggested, why don't we take a walk into Spaccanapoli? There's a Caravaggio there, una meraviglia, she said. And so as we were walking through the streets of downtown Naples, we walked into this small little church, fairly abandoned. There was no one inside. And I looked up and I saw this painting. Idana saw it both for the first time, and it was completely unfathomable. It was incredible, but very hermetic. We couldn't understand it. Like happens whenever we're in a museum and we don't understand a painting, we turn around and walk out. As we're walking out, we hear this voice, "Non andate via," which means, don't leave. You haven't seen it. You must come back. And we looked, and there was this man running from behind the altar, Angelo Esposito. And he grabbed us, and as he started to describe this painting to us, we realized that something had transformed in him. And we realized that we were almost touching that moment. All art, all sacred art, has been always painted to elevate the common man. And this Angelo Esposito, who came from a very simple background in Naples, had been transported into another realm. Now, having met him that first day, we found ourselves falling into his life, and we returned again and again and again.
Let's talk a little bit about the painting that is in question here, the famous Caravaggio, the 7 Acts of Mercy.
Yes.
It's a spectacular painting, and one that I believe has never left Naples since 1607 when it was painted by him. But recall for us the moment of encounter with the painting, because people are really moved by Caravaggio paintings when they see them. This is a very complex one. What do you remember about that first time you saw it?
Well, first it's startling because you see various scenes. You're looking at a street in Naples, a back street in Naples. There are 16 figures. You can't make out what they're doing. One woman, strangely enough, is giving her breast to a head that is an elderly man poking out of the bars of a prison. Another is a soldier who's cutting his cape, and it appears that there's a naked man on the street, his back absolutely glowing, brightly lit, that's reaching up and taking it. You see these angels cascading out of the sky. They look like they're about to collapse here on earth. Are they blessing what they see below, or have they been so shocked with the mercy that they see that they're moved into surprise? You can't dissect this painting. It's too difficult. And Caravaggio, I think, when he painted it, set the stage. He had murdered a man, or at least was accused of murder. He had to flee Rome for his life. He has bounty hunters after him, and he leaves and goes to another country, the Kingdom of Two Sicilies, which is the royal capital of Naples. He arrives. Once he arrives, out of nowhere come 7 young men, all from noble families, who commission this painting. They don't care what he's done. They know in front of them stands the greatest painter of the day.
He had a name for himself already.
Already he had painted those extraordinary paintings that both Pope Francis and Pope Benedict called their favorite, The Calling of Matthew.
Right.
He'd painted that in Rome. He had been commissioned a number of paintings. Many of them were rejected by the commissioners because they were so bold. They brought too much of reality into the story.
But there was something in those 7 founders who asked Caravaggio to paint the 7 acts.
Exactly.
What did they see in him, or what were they looking for?
Well, what had happened is they actually had started the first lay charity in Naples. And by that, they were engaged in these 7 works of mercy. Now, being noble, that was something that never was done by any of these families. That was the job of the church. They take care of the suffering. In this case, these were 7 young men who decided that they themselves were going to take this on as a mission, humanitarian mission. And with that compassion, they had begun their work. As soon as they had raised their money and built the church, who walks in but the greatest painter alive? And these 2 revolutionary groups, these young men who are breaking all the rules of the day by choosing that compassionate path, this painter who has painted the most extraordinary works of compassion and of sacred scenes that Rome had ever seen, all of a sudden converge. And these brothers, like lost brothers, come together. And Caravaggio receives the greatest, the most money that he had ever been commissioned a painting for, with a price on his head.
That's extraordinary. I mean, just considering the psychological pressure, that must have been on him to be able to paint in the way that he did. But what comes out in your book, which is really something, is that Caravaggio was a revolutionary.
Yes.
There was something inherently revolutionary in his painting.
Yeah.
How so? Well,
first, we see his paintings and they seem so direct, and the question is why? The Renaissance is over. The idea of painting in uniform light, idealized figures that we've seen in Michelangelo with the rippling muscles, those days are gone. Caravaggio paints from reality. He paints truth. And his models aren't imagined in his mind. They're off the streets. They could be you, myself. They could be the bus driver, the garbage collector.
Angelo.
And from there, they're rendered sacred. And he also creates 3-dimensionality with the dark and the light. What's called chiaroscuro, which means light and darkness. It's a very dark time. The Spaniards have conquered all of Italy, and there's an autocracy that just has people under tremendous pressure. It's always midnight. And yet, in every one of his paintings, there's that sacred light. There's that illumination. There's that hope. There's that esperanza that comes through. And so all of these elements, using the common man, using the lighting, painting from reality, and telling the story of the Gospels as if they're happening in the streets today outside, this was a shock. And he transformed art.
All right. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be back in just a second with more about how this extraordinary painting affected the life, especially of Angelo Esposito. Don't go anywhere. Terence Ward is a writer, producer, and cross-cultural consultant on the Middle East. Born in Boulder, Colorado, he grew up in Saudi Arabia and Iran. He's a specialist in Near Eastern history and contemporary Islamic political movements. Terence serves as an international trustee of Religions for Peace, the world's largest interfaith organization based in New York. In the end, replies Angelo, Caravaggio's art isn't about bishops in silk robes giving handouts to the needy. It's about simple people helping one another. He's the artist of the poor, our artist. There's no one else like him. It's all there. Cosa volete di più? What more do you want? His voice echoes in the chapel. His eyes, enlarged by his spectacles, are lit with flame. Here with Terence Ward discussing his book, The Guardian of Mercy. And Terry, one of the things I love about your book is you jump back and forth. You tell two stories at the same time, of your protagonist, Angelo Esposito, and of the great Caravaggio. Now, you mentioned that Angelo was from very, a simple, poor background.
Very.
What did Angelo see in the 7 Acts of Mercy, see in Caravaggio that spoke to him so intimately?
When we posed this question to him, he explained how he had been working in the Department of Sanitation before, and he had been plucked along with another 100 employees out of the department to be put in these churches that were being opened up, so downtown Naples could open up the churches and they could be more like museums. And he said for the first year, he confessed, he says, listen, art is a luxury for the poor. I mean, what did I do when I first came here? I had my coffee, I talked to my fellas, we walked out. But he said one day, he looked up at the painting and he saw it as if for the first time. And it reached out and struck him. And he realized that he recognized faces in that painting that he knew in the street. And it so electrified him, and he felt the immediacy so powerfully that he began to read again. He didn't know how to read. He began to buy books on Caravaggio. He plunged into it. He even held up his arm and he says, now I've got Caravaggio running in my veins. All he wanted to do is tell this story. And if there's any role of art, it has always been, is to raise the common man, to elevate the common man. We saw in this story a perfect metaphor. This was it in action. And then he would say, but Caravaggio is our artist. He's the artist of the poor. Very much like Pope Francis has said, don't forget the poor. The most vulnerable are those who we care for. That is our mission. That's what makes us different. And his reminder of the Year of Mercy is all about that. Well, strangely enough, the theology of Caravaggio and the theology of Pope Francis, 400 years later, also come together. So there are many threads, as you said in the story, that are uncanny.
You introduce a pretty serious conflict in Angelo's life. I mean, at one point, his family is on the verge of falling apart.
Exactly.
You were walking alongside him for a good chunk of that journey.
Yes.
Just take us through that reality in his life. Where was he, and how did this extraordinary painting sort of bring him back to life?
Well, he discovered, deep in our friendship and our journeys through Naples with him, he disappeared. And when we finally found him, he was a shattered man, completely transformed. And in his family, he had discovered that he had been, shall we say, betrayed by his wife for 10 years. And it was in southern Italy, there's a price to pay for that. And frequently there's a violent price to pay. It's almost coded in the DNA. We know that, we've seen that on television. But this became terrifying for myself and more importantly for my wife, who had Neapolitan genes. And so she actually started to coach him on ways in which to find forgiveness. But it was the painting that saved his life, because she would sit next to him and say to him, but Angelo, what message is Caravaggio trying to say in this painting? And of course, it's a cry for redemption. It's a cry for forgiveness. And what is the hardest thing for us to do is to forgive the ultimate betrayals. And yet, this is what we must do. This is the essence of our journey, and especially as Christians. In this painting of human solidarity, it is all about the hand reaching out to help the other. And I'm happy to say that he is with his wife now, and the family is united, and a miracle took place.
Well, and just like your book is depicts in your book, we'll jump back to the story of Caravaggio for a second. He's a very mysterious figure.
Yes.
We don't know much about him. He never wrote anything.
No.
And his life came to a kind of tragic, abrupt end.
Yeah.
Just tell me a little bit about that, about how Caravaggio's days ended.
It's a terribly tragic story because he was such a genius. And of course he was slandered years later. For 350 years, virtually his name was erased because of the nature of his paintings. It was so radically different. Caravaggio leaves Rome, comes to Naples. After he paints this painting, he continues on to Malta, hoping to be given a knighthood. Well, he was. But then he got in an altercation there and ended up being thrown in prison. Then he escapes from an impregnable prison, ends up in Sicily, crossing by night, sleeps with a knife under his pillow for his entire journey through Sicily, painting miracles along the way, returns to Naples, and then word comes from Rome that the pardon that he was hoping for has about to be given. With paintings ready to go to deliver to Cardinal Borghese in Rome, who had asked his uncle, the Pope, to forgive this painter of miracles, he travels north by boat. But then he gets taken off the boat and questioned in one of the ports. In a case of mistaken identity, the boat continues on with his paintings. Instead of going to Rome, where the pardon was given that day, he continues on. And then he disappears. He dies, we don't know where. They say Partercole, they say he may have died in the swamps. Could he have been killed by those who were following him in a vendetta? Did he die of malaria? No one knows. But in fact, he lives through all these works of mercy. He's denied all these works of mercy, which makes this painting so prophetic.
Absolutely, yeah, and timeless in a way.
Timeless, yeah.
We have a review from Father Michael Czerny of the Guardian of Mercy. Father Michael is a Jesuit who works very closely with Cardinal Peter Turkson at the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace at the Vatican. Father Michael.
I'm very happy to be reviewing this book, Terence Ward's The Guardian of Mercy. It's an extraordinary book about an extraordinary painting. Terence Ward has managed to bring together in the covers of this book a vast range of people, a bit like in the painting itself, but they are people from different times and different moments in history, and yet they really are together. And they are together because of a mystery which is beautifully expressed in the upper left-hand corner of the painting, where we see two angels practically falling out of heaven and getting ready to land on the earth. They remind us of the angels who were expelled from heaven, the bad angels who fought against St. Michael and lost. But in this case, they're not bad angels. They are good, ordinary angels who are living out what is actually happening, namely the fruits of the Incarnation, the fact that Christ has come to live among us. But what is going on in the earth is actually carrying out his message, his teaching, when people, ordinary people, reach out to one another in kindness and perform the works of mercy. So this book is a wonderful introduction to Caravaggio's painting. It's also a wonderful introduction to Naples, both of his time and of our time. And especially, it's a beautiful, accessible introduction to the teaching, the theology, the spirituality of Pope Francis, whose spirit runs throughout the book. And so he is finally also the guardian of mercy.
Okay, thank you very much, Father Michael. Terry, to
Yes.
care for our common home, this eighth work of mercy proposed by Pope Francis. What do you think?
Well, I feel that it's visionary, that it's ecumenical, and it's ecological, but more importantly, it's so deeply inspired, both by the work of St. Francis and by the world we live in now. It's a modern work of mercy for our modern epoch. One that covers all the other seven. And when I was asked by Cardinal Turkson and by Michael, Father Michael, to come to Rome on September 1st of this year, I must say I was a bit astonished when I found myself at the press office of the Vatican, at the table with Cardinal Turkson and Bishop Farrell next to me, to present this eighth work of mercy. And I think it speaks so deeply to the pontificate, to the idea that Pope Francis not only understands deeply that in this year of mercy, he needed to re-wed his encyclica with this idea of protecting the most vulnerable. How each of our acts, as simple as choosing not to use plastic, or to take a bus or public transport, or in America, turn off the lights. I mean, you're leaving a room, turn off the lights.
Right.
He's not asking us to do the great gestures, but to work this into our lives. And by doing that, we perform not only a corporal work of mercy, but a spiritual work of mercy, because we're aware. We're aware that we're linked with those on the other side of the world that may suffer. So again, another teaching moment, another epiphany, another revelation. For me, it was an exquisite honor and quite humbling.
We have to take one more break, but when we come back, some concluding remarks from Terence Ward. Don't go anywhere. The Guardian of Mercy, How an Extraordinary Painting by Caravaggio Changed an Ordinary Life Today, is published by Arcade and is available for purchase at arcadepub.com and at Ben McNally Books in Toronto. Also by Terence Ward, Searching for Hassan, A Journey to the Heart of Iran, published by Anchor Books. The maestro openly abandons all the rules of Renaissance painters before him. He turns his back on Raphael's elegant Madonnas and Michelangelo's heroically muscled figures. He rejects the time-honored belief that only handsome, noble saints, all bathed in uniform light, can be painted in sacred scenes. He holds up nature just as we see it, authentic, not a dreamscape. He thrusts the real world before our eyes. Terry, in your book, you tell us that this is actually the second time that you've written the book, because
yes.
your first manuscript was unexpectedly stolen.
Yes.
But you gathered enough courage and time and energy to tackle it again. And then you write in the book this: ironically, this extended time frame allowed for the book to be released at a moment when the spiritual tectonic plates are shifting in Rome and beyond. Not only does the current Pope Francis inspire the faithful, he astonishes the world with his statements that he delivers with dramatic honesty and passion. He strikes a deep chord. You've mentioned the connection between
Yes.
Pope Francis and Caravaggio. Let's look at that in terms of enacting mercy.
Yes.
You know, Caravaggio in this painting was enacting mercy.
Yes.
How do you see him connected to Francis in this particular way?
Well, I think they meet on so many levels. The assisting and helping and reaching out to the most vulnerable is, of course, one of the central themes of the pontificate. But Pope Francis does not tell us, he shows us. He does it. He does things that most of us would not do. He takes us into the streets. He takes us down to Lampedusa. He takes us out into the waters of the Mediterranean, where the bodies have disappeared. He gives prayers there. And these aren't even Catholics. He goes to the island of Lesbos and brings back 11 families. He washes the feet of a Muslim girl in a prison. Everything I'm saying has not been done before. There are those who sometimes criticize him for perhaps showing us that reality, that truth, but that is exactly what Caravaggio was criticized for. And I think in this day and age, these brave, courageous, inspired, and you could say even blessed men of spirit change us. And if there's anything we need more today, it's that. It's that transformation. Caravaggio's paintings were to help people transform and to feel and to touch and have that immediate contact with the mercy that they saw before them. And Pope Francis does exactly the same. Mm-hmm. He's been teaching us, he's been living it, and we've all seen those actions. And that's what's changed us. And that's what's made him loved by virtually every community on this earth. Because in him, they see the sacred working. Non-judgmental, always reaching out, always reminding. Let's not forget the lower ones.
Well, it's a beautiful lesson, and it's a beautiful book. Terence Ward, thanks very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Sebastian. It was my honor. Thank you.
The book is The Guardian of Mercy, How an Extraordinary Painting by Caravaggio Changed an Ordinary Life Today by Terence Ward. You can get it right here at Ben McNally Books in Toronto or online from our good friends at Arcade Publishing. Just visit arcadepub.com. You can learn more about Terence and his wife Idana by visiting their website, terence-idana.com. I want to thank our guest reviewer today, Father Michael Cherney from the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace at the Vatican. And remember, if you want to see my video review of The Guardian of Mercy, you can find that on our website, saltandlighttv.org/subject matters. Thanks a lot for joining us today. We'll see you again next time. Subject Matters with Sebastian Gomes is sponsored by the Cullen family. Our Salt and Light team works hard to bring you quality Catholic programming like Subject Matters. Please consider supporting our mission by making a donation today. Thank you for your generosity. Remember, our hope begins with you.